Sikkim 365 and Baylor Plus have teamed up to bring Baylor fans the ultimate content bundle. You can sign up now for $17.99 a month, a $5 monthly savings, and get instant access to all premium content on both websites. For more information, visit either sikkim365.com or baylorplus.com today. What's up, Baylor family? Welcome into Inside Baylor Sports, the official daily podcast of Baylor Athletics. It's Thursday, October 3rd, and before Grace and I go into our defensive keys for the game against number 16 Iowa State, we are first joined by Baylor defensive coordinator Matt Powledge to give us a little insight into the first 5 games of Baylor season and the outlook for the remainder of the season. Coach Powledge, it's great to have you on today. Everything going well with you?
Yeah, going good. Had a good practice today, third down day, so we're looking good for this week.
Oh, you just changed my first question. So third down defense this year has been a little bit different for this squad than it was last year. I know a lot of growth, but what's the biggest thing for you on third downs? I mean, what are you teaching and preaching during practice and during the games?
Yeah, I think, there's been an emphasis on it affecting the quarterback and pressure. And obviously some of our newcomers have applied some, have given us a little bit more juice, maybe a Steve Linton, a KT with his blitz ability. So we've been able to create rush with maybe less, be able to play coverage with a little bit more. And we've been able to get off the field, a little bit more often. Third downs last week, okay, we felt like that was a big part of them scoring points in the first half. It was, hey, third down on the first drive of the game. We had opportunity to get off the field and did it. And then later on, we had 2 first drives on the next long scoring drive. I think that was like a 10-play drive. And then in the second half, third down defense, all of a sudden we're, rock solid. And so just want to be consistent there, obviously. But to answer your question and just kind of, review, I think some of the newcomers have, given us a little bit more juice and allowed us to maybe change our philosophy a little bit there.
You kind of mentioned the second half adjustments and just changes in mentality and just physicality. What kind of went into that? What did you see kind of on film review that changed for y'all in the second half?
Yeah, I think a little bit of it was, first half, first drive, maybe we're close in some areas, but weren't making maybe the necessary plays. And maybe they want a one-on-one block here. Or maybe want a one-on-one route there. And I think after maybe the pick and short field touchdown to create 14-0, I think that next drive, people started pressing. I got to make a play. Like, got to make a play. This game's going to get out of hand. And people just started kind of going rogue a little bit on that drive, I felt like, with good intention, you know what I mean? But it's like, hey, your eyes are bad. Hey, you took a chance there and you don't need to, you don't have to, like stuff like that. And so, I think once it got to that point and that started happening, it was coach called him up on the sideline. I was up in the box. Coach called him up on the sideline and said, look, we're not going to be out of this game, but we can't do that type of stuff. And so we reiterated that at halftime, made a couple of tweaks to the game plan. And then, but more than anything, I think we calmed down and started trusting our keys, trusting our eyes, executing at a higher level, and getting off the field. And so I think that was really important. A lot of people would say, hey, they had the lead, they changed what they were doing. Not really. They were running the same concepts in the passing game. You know what I mean? They came back to some stuff in the run game. We were just fitting it better, cleaner, and again, made a couple of tweaks schematically that kind of helped us out.
Yeah, so through 5 games, I know the defensive line has been an emphasis in this particular scheme. You need those guys to do a lot of dirty work. What was the biggest difference from last year that you saw to this year? Is it just physicality? What is that? How is that group kind of gelled this year where it didn't necessarily ever gel last year?
Yeah, I think being able to move Trevor Maha, outside, to the end position where he's playing a 4-eye, sometimes a 5. I think that's really helped. We get a little bit of toughness there, with him. Maybe in the run game, and then passing wise, a lot of times we're moving them inside on those third downs. But and then the acquisition of Big E, Noel, has been big. As you can see, Coop's been a little bit banged up, and so to have him there, it's been really nice. And then Jackie, I think I told a lot of people in the offseason, like, get ready. This guy's got some pop, man. He's got some explosion. He's going to flash. And I think you're just seeing the start of that. I mean, he's going to continue to get better as the season goes along. So I think front-wise, we have a little bit more leadership there. Trev kind of took that role in the offseason. They're a close-knit group, man, and they care a bunch. And, they're trying to give it hell every Saturday.
I know PFF grades don't necessarily tell the whole story, but it really did feel like your safety group took a big step forward this week against BYU.
Mm-hmm.
What kind did you see from your group specifically? And also, looking at, it seemed like you were trusting guys more, like DJ Coleman and Corey Gordon were in there a lot as well. What would you see from that group as a whole?
Yeah. I do agree with you. There's some guys that have taken some steps forward. Carl Williams, had gotten banged up after, during the Charleston State game, and, missed 2 games for us, and came back versus Colorado. And he's still not 100%, but if Carl, he's a warrior. I think people will see, hopefully after the bye week, we can get him maybe as close as possible, if not to 100%. But, I think people will see, just how talented he really is. And then, so in that process, we've been able to get a lot more reps to guys like Corey, guys like DJ. Corey's starting to step up and grow up a little bit, which is cool to see, because it's kind of time for that. He's as talented as anybody in the room. He's becoming a little bit more of a, football intelligent guy, which when he got here, he was pretty raw in those areas. And then DJ has just been super consistent, and so I think, challenging those guys to make more plays. If we make plays at practice, we'll make plays in the game. And so if you had been to practices in the first couple of weeks, you would have saw us get our hands on a lot of balls, but not finish them. We play tight coverage, but maybe not get the ball out, stuff like that. We're doing a much better job of that. And I think Charleston State was probably our worst tackling game as a group. I think each week that's improved. I think we had two missed tackles last week as a group. And so that's 3 guys on the field at all times. So 3 times, 60, about 180, snaps, to only have 2, is you're getting better for sure. So that group is another group that, they want to be good, man. And so they're getting better. I think they'll continue to get better.
So there were 2 freshmen that came in this year in the recruiting class, and just curious kind of how they're doing, and Josh Lair and Mason Dossett as 2 guys that had a lot of talent coming in. And I know they're young freshmen, but what have you seen from them so far?
A lot of growth. That's what I would say. I think fall camp, their athleticism flashed and their ability flashed. But maybe not as much as you would think because of just kind of being overwhelmed maybe with the playbook and just the newness, and really only Mason's second year playing defense. Josh just being, just so new to everything. Fort Bend kind of has their system, their scheme, and it's honestly pretty simple. It's kind of like, hey, let's go out there and our cats are going to be better than your cats. And so there's a lot of things just with schematics, with details, techniques that were just so different. And so I think you see them now playing a whole lot faster, in the course of practice. With a lot of that scout reps, you know what I mean? But we use our own terminology a lot of times on scouts. And so they're really just running our calls that really match the opposing team's calls. And so I've been able to grow in that direction. Last 2 weeks, Mason's had to switch over and play some scout team receiver for us because we're a little bit banged up. And he's actually caught a ball or 2 on a couple of our TVs. It's like, man, this dude's talented. But yeah, both those guys, we're really happy they're Bears. And hopefully at some point in time, maybe this year, on a home game, maybe we can get those guys out there because they're improving weekly.
Yeah. So last question for me, and you can keep it kind of brief. I know we're short on time, but Lorando Johnson's had an interesting journey. I know you guys have kind of crossed paths multiple times at Baylor. He left, you left, you're back together. What have you seen from him throughout his career now that you're back with him for his senior and the way he's grown?
Yeah, I think the biggest growth from him has probably been personally, maturity, what type of kid he was, what type of young man he's becoming, those type of things. He's faced a lot of adversity. He's made mistakes. He's learned from them. He's grown from them. He's better. He's the best version of himself right now than he's ever been. Those type of things. I think he wants to be. He's got a heart of gold. He wants to be a really good football player, but he wants to be a good dude too. And I think he played sparingly last week. He dislocated two fingers a couple of weeks ago. They're all bent back and kind of mangled right now. We kind of have them basically like in a mini cast right now, and so we look like a bunch of pirates out there right now. We got Tevin with a club on, and Snacks with a club on, and JJ Evans is back. He's got a club on. It's like, holy man, like it's like everybody stuck their hand in a meat grinder or something. But nonetheless, man, he's been out there and toughing it up, and I've just been mindset wise talking to him like, man, you're the toughest dude on this team. You're the toughest dude on this freaking team, bro. Because I know mentally if he can fight through the pain on Saturday, he'll be able to really shut a key receiver down, get us a third down stop, because he's that talented in my opinion.
The schedule turns over a lot. The second half of the year, you're playing against a lot of very different offenses than you've played in the first half. What do you think the key is for the defense as a whole as you kind of move in after this week and into the bye week? What's the thing that y'all are just trying to get better at each week to make sure that y'all have success going forward?
I think, consistency, you know what I mean? I think is going to be huge. I think you think about the finish against Colorado and the slow start against BYU, Utah was a little bit of a slow start as well. But, I mean, outside of that, you kind of got two games where it was a slow start. You kind of got one game there wasn't a great finish. And so just kind of putting it all together, 4 quarters of football for us. Air Force probably our most complete game, you know what I mean? And that was a hard prep, man. And so I think that game really grew us up, just so, hey, you got to be disciplined. You got to be where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there. You got to rely on the man and trust the man next to you and all that, type of stuff. And so we've become better, because of that week. And, the Colorado thing, was kind of a deal where, you wish it could have finished better. And last week we finished like champions, and so just putting 4 quarters of football together is going to be key down the stretch. And I know everybody hears that, says that. It's like, well, how do you do that? And it's like, well, we got to practice that way, in my opinion. You know what I mean? You got to let the pass be the pass. You got to be where your feet are. You can't be thinking about, we didn't finish very well, last game. It's like, no. You know what I'm saying? Each play has a life of its own. And so, I would say, there was a handful of people throwing up like fours today, in the last period of practice. It's like, okay, and they're starting to get it. Like, that's the mentality. You know what I mean? Our tempo period today, our defense had 2 turnovers and in tempo period against our, and so against our offense. And so that's what I'm talking about. We started fast. We finished strong today. Like I told them after practice today, like that's what Saturday needs to look like. You know what I mean? And so I think it will, man. I really do. I got a lot of trust and belief in this group.
Coach, really appreciate your time today. Good luck this weekend and obviously the rest of the season. We look forward to visiting with you again.
Yeah, thank y'all, man. Appreciate y'all a bunch. Always great seeing y'all.
Thanks, Coach. Thanks, Coach. So great visit with Coach Powledge. I mean, a lot of insight. If you haven't heard from him, it's been a little while since anyone's heard from him, but really cool insights. Calling play or not calling plays any longer with Coach Rand on the defense. But he's still incredibly involved with everything going on schematically and obviously safeties, coaching the safeties and overseeing the entire defense. But Grayson, from that conversation, anything specific that you took away from it?
I mean, I think the place that you start is just clearly there's a lot of confidence in what this defense can be. and the steps that they've taken. And obviously, as Powledge said, they're not perfect. They're not even where they need to be yet because they're not putting together the 4 quarters that they need to put together. But I think in general, everything is there for them, right? There's clear signs of them taking huge steps forward. And as the second half of the season is almost here, it's important that they start getting closer to putting together 4 quarters. And I think all of that's great. Like, clearly they've talked about it, and also clearly they feel confident about kind of the strides that they're making and where they could end up being by the end of the year. So yeah, I felt like it was great. That was kind of the main thing, though, that, this positive momentum that we've been hearing about, it's still there right now for this Baylor defense.
Yeah, the biggest thing I took away from it was you asked about specifically, or I asked specifically about third down defense, and he said we have some new dudes that are making plays. Well, you look at the game last week against BYU; those new dudes weren't on the field for the most part because of different reasons, and I think that shows kind of the importance of those guys that were missed last week, and including Lorando Johnson, who tried to play, obviously dealing with some dislocated fingers, and it sounds like he's, for this particular week and moving forward, is very important to the defensive scheme and being able to lock up key receivers. And he's shown that. I mean, he's a fast guy. He's very aggressive, has that swagger you want as a cornerback. And he only played 3 snaps last week against BYU. And he was one of, I guess, 3 cornerbacks that did not play in that game. Very unfortunate with Caden Jenkins being out and Chateau Reed being out as well. So your top 3 corners weren't playing. He's kind of leading the way there. So anxious to see him get back on the field this week against Iowa State. But yeah, so moving with that, you have something else you want to say?
Yeah, just really quick. I think it's also important to mention, we've talked about the fact that Carl Williams isn't back to 100%. And I think kind of what Powledge just said is so important. And I think it's been kind of missed just because of, the way the season has gone so far. Carl was expected to be a dude. They're probably top 3 best player on defense at the start of the season. And so for him to get banged up in the first game and not be available for a couple games, and then, really just try to get himself back, to a point where he could be at 100%, he's still not there yet. And I think over the course of the second half of the year, I think he's kind of the guy that I'm looking at and going, wow, if he gets healthy, I think he could take this defense really to another level, especially against the kind of offenses that they're going to play in the second half of the year.
Yeah, and you relate that to Baylor fans who are not familiar with Carl and what position he plays. It's the Jalen Petrie position. He can play a variety of positions. I mean, the fact that he was a kind of a cornerback / safety prospect, he can do well in one-on-one matchups on the corner, but he's playing a true hybrid role now, and he's going to have an impact on the game whenever he's in there. So he didn't play the Utah game, didn't play the Air Force game, comes back against Colorado, but it sounds like they brought him back because they absolutely needed him in that particular matchup. He's played the last couple of weeks. So very anxious to see him continue to develop in this defense in his role. Only a sophomore, so he has a lot of room to grow even still. And with all of that, after visiting with Coach Powledge, we're going to move into our defensive keys of the game. Grayson, I'll let you start off with this, but to me, if Baylor's going to win this game and be competitive, it's going to start with a very good to great defensive performance by Baylor.
I agree. I think that's an area that they're going to have to be awesome. I don't think Baylor's going to be able to go into Ames and score in the high 20s. Now, I didn't think that was going to be the case against BYU either, and obviously that game went sideways. But I think for this one, I have a feeling that it's probably going to be rather low scoring, and so Baylor's defense is going to have to really anchor that. I think the place that it truly does start for Baylor is stopping the run game. I think that's been something that Baylor has done really well this season for the most part. You point to a couple runs here and there, but for the most part, they've been really solid against the run. And so you come into this game, and Iowa State really hasn't, made Abu Sama carry them to a win, but that's coming. He's that kind of running back. Eventually, they're going to give him 20, 25 carries in a game and ask him to go win a game. I kind of have a hunch that it's going to be in this game, that they're going to try to get him going early and often and really try to win up front. And I think that's an area that Baylor does have a little bit of an advantage, and they have to win that battle, I think, because if you allow Iowa State to run for 170, 180, 200 yards, it's a recipe for failure on the road because it's going to allow them to control the clock, control the tempo, and get in very manageable third down situations.
Yeah, I think if you go back and watch the tape on Iowa State this year, I really like Rocco Beck, but something seems a little off with him in the passing game. Like he's missing some throws that he didn't miss last year at all. I mean, as a freshman, and now this year he's probably going to turn around and make them all. But when they've been at their best is when they're running the ball and converting third downs. And I'm with you. I'm like, if Baylor is going to take anything away in this game, and Coach Aranda does that in a lot of situations where say, okay, this is their area of strength. Let's completely shut this down and make them beat us elsewhere. Iowa State's set up to do that. They want you to overcommit to stopping the run. But if you don't stop the run, they're going to absolutely grind you out to wins. And we saw that against Iowa to a great extent. But then Houston last week, who has a pretty good defense, I would say, there under Coach Fritz, and they just ran the ball, and ultimately ran for 250 plus yards, broke a couple big runs late in that game. Basically half of their yards in that game came on 2 runs. But that's what they want to wear you down, and then they're going to break it late. If you're going to allow them to run the ball and go that path. So I think Baylor has to take that away from them. They take that away from them and then make Rocco Beck beat you in the pass game. They have plenty of speed at receiver and talent at receiver, as we know, but you want that to be their they want that to be their secondary option, and Baylor has to make that their first option, and try to win then on the perimeter with your talent out there. And it goes back to Lorando Johnson, and that's my first key. You took my first key. So my second key is be reliable in the secondary and go out there and be reliable in coverage. They're going to make you come down into the box and defend there. But like Coach Powledge told us, you can't do too much in the run game as safeties. You have to understand that they're going to want to take shots over the top. I think Rocco Beck this year is like taking 10 or 11% of his total pass attempts downfield, where last year that number was much higher. And so that's coming at some point. Just like you said, they're going to feed the running backs more and more and more. Well, at some point, that's going to feed, and they're going to hit you over the top. So your secondary can't get lulled to sleep, and that means you have to be reliable in coverage.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I was going to talk about those 2 receivers that they have, Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel. Those 2 guys are really good, like really, really good. And they've given Baylor problems. Last year they gave Baylor a lot of problems trying to guard them. And I think that does speak to getting Snacks back, Lorando Johnson, because if they don't have Caden Jenkins and they don't have Lorando, I mean, it's going to be tough to stop, especially Jaden Higgins on the outside, who is just a matchup problem for everyone. He's one of the best receivers in the Big 12, in my opinion. I think he's so complete, so fast, good hands. There's just a lot that he does well. And so Baylor's really going to have to focus on slowing him down. And of course, Jalen Noel, which is slot. That's going to be a lot of Carl Williams is what that's going to be probably. So to see that matchup and see if Carl's taken another step forward now that, it's another week removed from the injury, and just kind of seeing if he can really be able to step up to the challenge along with the rest of the secondary and just trying to keep everything in front of them. So yeah, I think that's a really good one. And I think kind of piggybacking off of that comment, I think slowing down the tight end position is very important in this matchup. I think there's going to be a lot of focus on their star players, Higgins, Noel, Abu Sama, Rocco Beck. Like there's going to be a lot of focus on those guys. But an area that Iowa State has killed Baylor basically every time they've played them is the tight end position. Yeah. Every time. And Ben Brammer, I think he had a good game against them last year, but you keep going back. It's like Charlie Kolar, their other tight end that they had along with Kolar. I just remember them running down the field for 30, 40-yard gains against Baylor multiple times. And so Ben Brammer is a really good one. He's got nearly 100 yards receiving so far on the season, and he's a guy that can be a matchup problem and a guy you kind of forget about in their offense. And they will take shots. They will throw the ball to the tight end often. That's been a staple since Matt Campbell got to Iowa State. And so that's an area that I feel like it's kind of a hidden one, but something that in this matchup has actually been very important for both sides.
Yeah. And if you're talking about an offense that doesn't run a ton of plays, that wants to get into third and short situations, those tight ends become more valuable, because when you're say they run 50 plays a game, Well, if that tight end has 5 catches and they all go for first downs or they all go for something very productive, well, then that's a huge portion of the game. It's much different than using a tight end when you're running 75 plays and it's 1 or 2 passes to them. They're going to be very efficient the way they attack with the tight ends. And if you watch their film, it's just popping up at opportune times. So I'm with you. I think that what Baylor has to do defensively is make sure he's accounted for. You don't want to have to waste Carl Williams on him, for instance. So who does that mean is covering him? Is Keaton Thomas? Is that a third linebacker that they start utilizing? Is it Raw Dilworth that potentially has a bigger role in this game? The good news in a lot of ways, and not that all these offenses are the same, but Utah, BYU, and now Iowa State kind of had the same philosophies in what they want to do. Utah specifically used tight ends a lot. BYU not as much, but Iowa State's going to utilize it. So I think the good news is Baylor's had to come to games with the same type of mindsets in multiple games. That's going to help defense. But I would have said the same thing last year, and then it goes haywire immediately. And so I think there's some challenge to it. Obviously, still, I think Iowa State, of all the offenses, especially without Cam Rising at Utah when that game was played, this offense has the most potential. And what they're going to do is, who their playmakers are, where for Baylor's offense, for instance, it's which receiver is going to make a big play today. There's multiple of them. There's not one go-to guy. Every single game, it seems like there's a different leading receiver. Well, Iowa State, what they're going to, who they want to get the ball to, and they're very good at getting the ball. They want to extend drives. They're okay with saying we're going to be efficient all the way down the field. We're going to we want to get the 3rd and short, and then we're going to pass it or throw it. And so that kind of leads me to this particular thing, is get them off the field. And this is every single game. But when you start talking about getting turnovers and getting crucial 4th down stops, if Baylor can have 3 or 4 of those moments where they get a turnover or they can get a 4th down stop in a limited possession game, which was what Iowa State wants to do, that's going to give them the best chance to win. So for me, get 3. I don't even think you have to get 4. I think if you can get 3 turnovers, including 4th down stops, we did this in our last episode of 4th down stops are essentially turnovers. Get 3 of those somewhere, however it might be. If they do that, they're going to give themselves the best chance to win.
I mean, that would definitely give them a great shot to win if they're able to get 3 of them, because you'd hope that your offense is taking care of the football, even though that's something that Iowa State's done well. Iowa State, I think, is 5th in the country in turnover margin. So it's going to be really difficult for Baylor to win that, have a huge edge there, especially the way they've played. But if they're able to flip that script and be able to, force some pressure on Rocco Becht and really just kind of make them uncomfortable, you might be able to see it. And I think that's kind of where I go next, is that, I think that last week against BYU, an area that was missing was BYU, I don't think ever really felt uncomfortable, especially in the first half. Maybe in the second half to some extent as well. But, whenever Jake Retzlaff was dropping back, I don't think he was ever really nervous about a pass rush or ever really nervous about where a blitz was coming from. It felt like their offensive line did a great job of picking that up, and BYU's offensive line is very, very good in pass protection. This week, Iowa State, not as good in pass protection, but better at run blocking. And so it's kind of, mixing and matching that. But I think getting Steve Linton back this week, Garmin Randolph practice according to Dave Aranda, so maybe you get him back this week as well, close to full strength, and getting those 2 guys back I think could be very key in this game, especially if you're able to force some longer 3rd downs, because I think a lot of Iowa State fans have said, and people in the Big 12 media as well, that Iowa State's kind of been vanilla this year so far, aside from the Iowa game where they showed a few different things, especially late, but they've had some real opportunities where they haven't had to show much, where their offense has just been able to just be, we're just going to do our base stuff and we're going to win this game and no need to show much. I think in this game, they're going to show some different things and maybe look more explosive, or maybe give Baylor a lot more to look at. And so for that reason, I think it's very important that Baylor's disruptive, and that they're not allowing Iowa State to get in a comfort zone with these new things that they're going to be doing. Because if you allow them to, you're going to give up some big plays. So getting a pass rush, creating havoc, blitzing guys like Keaton Thomas, Carl Williams, finding that kind of right mixture, I think is going to be really important to keeping them off balance a little bit, off schedule, and then of course just feeling uncomfortable in general, which is tough to do because usually there's a pretty nice calmness from this type of Iowa State offense under Matt Campbell.
Yeah, I mean it's a system that's been in place. Everybody that's coming through the system is good for that particular system. They've recruited to it. Like it's kind of like the old dude in the room, right? Like it's just like you kind of know what you're going to get. And it's either you're going to beat us the way we do it or you're not going to beat us. Like you're not going to be able to make us change. And they're going to be good. Everything that stems off of what they want to do, the adjustments that they need to make, they're built in. And so I'm curious because you mentioned that about they haven't really done this or this. Like deep shots right now are at a much lower rate than they saw all of last year. And that was with the freshman quarterback. So it's coming. But it's also interesting because why it's been on tape. So why hasn't it been showed to this juncture? Like what is the holdback? Because if you go back, it's Matt Campbell. It's his offense last year. It's the same quarterback. It's the same playmaking receivers and tight ends for the most part. Some changes at running back, but they haven't taken some of the same shots that they did last year, at least on the same consistency. So I'm curious to see how long it takes them to get into that. Or maybe they just feel so confident in everything they're doing. And like, why are we going to change up what we're going to do at this juncture? On the other hand, against Houston, you have 3 points through almost 3 quarters. You would think, well, maybe we should open up a little bit more, but they never did. And that might have been a defensive philosophy where they said Houston's not going to score on us. We don't need to. We can win this game 3-0 if we need to. So, something has to give with what they're going to do, and they're waiting for the right moment to do it.
Yeah, I think against Houston it was one of those things where they were dominating time of possession. And I mean, they ran the ball 38 times for 240 yards. I mean, There was really no pressure to say, oh yeah, let's take a shot deep downfield. It's like, no, let's get 5 yards every time we hand the ball off, and then we're getting first down. So, and then again, you're playing Arkansas State the week before that. Not much of a challenge there. The Iowa game was the true challenge. North Dakota, not much of a challenge either. And so I truly do think that there's some things that they've been holding back. We'll see how much they dive into that, how much they open that up. I think in general, though, you and I kind of mentioned it with our first key. I think if you can stop the run, that is the area in my eyes. Like you have to be able to stop the run at a high rate. Iowa State's averaging nearly 5 yards per carry, 163 yards rushing. They want to run the football. They want to be efficient in that area. If you can take that away from them and then they're trying to implement new stuff, then you're going to have an opportunity to succeed. But if not, it's going to be really hard. Like if they're giving up 175, 180 yards, it's going to be really tough to keep them from scoring in the high 20s, which will be tough to match.
Yeah. And obviously it goes back to our first key. You took it from me. It was your first key. It's like, it starts with stopping the run. Make them beat you in another way because you don't want to get into a game where they're eating up time possession. You're not willing to stop the run. So you're just slowing the game down. You're not giving your offense any chances. And it's already going to be tough enough if your offense is going to be limited on chances against a really good defense. And to that, I think defensively, an area that kind of stood out to me in researching this game is that Baylor, they're okay against 20-yard plays, right? So 20-yard plays in general, Baylor ranks 6th and gives up 17. Iowa State only has 18 on the entire season, and that's 14th in the Big 12 right now. So it kind of feeds into they're not going to do it unless they have to. So force them into taking those deep shots, becoming more explosive, but then also just tackling on the edge. When that ball goes to the perimeter, don't let a 5-yard pass turn into a 20-yard gain. You have to tackle well on the perimeter. That's being reliable in the secondary. So that's it, man. Like I think stop the run is I don't think there needs to be 3 keys for the defense. I think it needs to start with stop the run and then play whatever the adjustments that Iowa State makes, then make those adjustments accordingly.
I agree. I think this game is really about just making them as uncomfortable as possible at home. And the ways you do that are stopping the run and getting pressure on Rocco Becht when you have opportunities to do so. And stemming from that, if you're able to do those 2 things, it feels like it gives you an opportunity to take away their best playmakers. And that those 3 are Abu Sama, Jaden Higgins, and Jalen Knoll. Those are their 3 guys. And if you can take away that run game and then get pressure and make Becht be maybe a little bit more inefficient than he's been this year, then it'll give them a chance to win this game in Ames, even though hey, it's a tall task. I mean, Iowa State's one of the best teams in the Big 12, and any Iowa State fans that are, watching this, we have a lot of respect for that team. They are very good, and they're set up to have a really good season. And Baylor's going to have to play their best football if they're going to have any shot at winning this game.
Yeah, and something too before we close up here, we talked about this before we came on air. It seems like in the last, at least dating back until the 2018 season, kind of every other year Baylor travels to Ames, those games have been super close. I mean, super competitive one way or the other. Obviously, Baylor won there in 2022, right before everything kind of went haywire for Baylor and where the direction they went. But Baylor won that game in 2022. The 2020 game was ultra competitive. The 2018 game was interesting because it was kind of that scuffle that really got Baylor fans and Iowa State fans heated with one another. Iowa State was out big in that game. Baylor settled in with Matt Rule's team and made it a decently competitive game late. But then go back to 2016, another very competitive game before the Matt Rule era. So really all these games in Ames have been very close. And the common factor is Matt Campbell and his style of play. And they want to out-execute you, and they don't care if they win by 1 point or 40 points. They're going to do the same thing every single game. And so to me, Baylor's going to have a chance for this to be a close game. It's what do you go out and make the winning plays? If they can make winning plays and they can put a complete game together, that's going to give them the best chance to win this one.
I agree. And with this being a night game in Ames, this is, a lot of teams have gone into Ames for night games and gotten punched in the mouth early and just completely wither. And they've had a lot of blowout wins, especially during Matt Campbell's time in Ames. And so Baylor's going to have to be ready, because if you start slow in Ames, I don't think there's a chance that you're going to be able to come back from down 20 points or down 14 points. That's a much different task than being at home for an 11 a.m. game against BYU. They have got to start fast. They've got to start strong, especially on that defensive side of the ball, and make sure that no matter what the offense is doing for Baylor, that the defense is there to have their back and play complementary football.
Yeah, that's it. You can't have a redo of a BYU or Utah. Like, it has to be a fast start. I mean, even the Air Force game where they turned the ball over multiple times in the first half, 3 or 4 times total in the first half, they kept that one close when it never should have been. It'll be, if they can start off fast or at least steady, just don't get behind 14 points, because that's a death knell up there in Ames. So, all right, Baylor family, that's going to do it for today's episode of Inside Baylor Sports, the official daily podcast of Baylor Athletics. Thanks to each of you for listening, including any Iowa State fans. But for Grayson Grunhafer, I'm Colt Barber. Have a great Thursday, and Sick 'em Bears.